My name is Edward Thompson, and I carry with me a secret that few would dare to believe. That night of April 14, 1912, was not just the sinking of a ship, but the beginning of a nightmare that would forever change my perception of humanity. I worked as a research assistant in the secret laboratory located in the bowels of the Titanic. We were a select group of scientists developing something that should never have come to light: an experimental virus, a mutation that turned humans into mindless creatures thirsty for flesh and blood. That fateful night, it all began with a simple accident. One of our researchers was bitten during an experiment. Within hours, chaos ensued. The first infected began attacking other crew members, spreading an infection that multiplied rapidly. The ship's corridors turned into a scene of horror. Screams, blood, people running in desperation. But we were not just victims. We were part of a much larger and more sinister plan than anyone could imagine. When I realized the situation was completely out of control, I knew we needed a drastic solution. We couldn't allow that virus to reach land. We couldn't risk a mass contamination. It was then that a group of secret military personnel, who had been monitoring our work, made a radical decision to sink the Titanic. But it wouldn't be with an iceberg, as the official story claims. A specially prepared submarine awaited us nearby, ready to eliminate any trace of our research. I managed to escape in one of the last lifeboats, carrying with me some crucial samples. We were few, survivors, and we all made a pact of silence. The world could never know the truth about what really happened that night. The days following the sinking were a nightmare of silence and conspiracy. Each survivor carried an immense weight, the secret that could change the course of world history. I remember clearly the moment the submarine approached the Titanic. It wasn't an ordinary submarine. It was a special biological containment unit equipped to destroy any trace of the zombie virus we had developed. The controlled explosions were precise. First, they eliminated the compartments where the experiments were conducted. Then, they destroyed any physical evidence of our research. The iceberg would be just a smokescreen to cover the true cause of the sinking. During the attack, I saw horrible creatures moving in the bowels of the ship. Infected individuals who were no longer human, but not entirely dead either. An intermediate state of existence that science should never have created. Our initial goal was to develop a virus that could create super-resistant soldiers. But something went terribly wrong. The mutation was faster and more aggressive than any of us could have predicted. The few survivors who knew the truth made a blood oath. We would be the guardians of this secret. Anyone who tried to reveal anything would be immediately silenced. The newspapers published the story of the iceberg. Families mourned their dead. But we knew the truth behind that tragedy. Years later, we continued monitoring possible mutations. Those samples I saved are our only record of what truly happened that fateful night. The world is not ready to know that the Titanic was much more than a ship. It was the first testing ground for a biological weapon that could have forever changed the concept of war. The truth about the Titanic is more complex than anyone could imagine. Our secret laboratory was not just an isolated project, but part of an international network of experimental research that pushed the boundaries of ethics and morality. I remember the faces of my fellow scientists. Brilliant men and women, but completely dehumanized in their quest for absolute knowledge. We were funded by governments and secret organizations that saw the zombie virus as a potential revolutionary weapon. The first symptoms of the infection were subtle. It began with an almost imperceptible behavioral change. Increased aggression, gradual loss of higher cognitive functions, an inexplicable thirst for human flesh. Our initial tests were conducted on prisoners and marginalized individuals, people no one would miss. By the time of the sinking, we had already lost control. About 40% of the crew was infected, slowly transforming into creatures that defied any scientific understanding. The submarine that followed us wasn't just a unit of destruction, but also of containment. I managed to save 3 vials of the virus. They were hidden in a special compartment in my jacket. Each vial represented a different variation of the mutation, each one more dangerous than the last. The military personnel accompanying us knew we couldn't allow any trace of the virus to escape. That's why the sinking was so meticulously planned. An iceberg would be the perfect excuse, an apparently natural accident that would cover our tracks. My fellow researchers were sacrificed without hesitation. We were just pawns in a much larger game, where human lives were nothing more than numbers in a secret report. After the sinking, I was relocated. My identity was completely altered. Edward Thompson ceased to exist officially, becoming just another ghost carrying a secret that could destroy humanity. The samples I saved remain with me. I await the right moment to reveal them, or to destroy them forever. The years following the Titanic were a labyrinth of secrets and paranoia. Every move I made was carefully monitored. I knew I wasn't completely free from those who watched me. The scars from that night weren't just physical, but deeply psychological. Nightmares haunted me constantly. Images of bodies transforming, screams echoing in the ship's corridors, the smell of blood and decay mixed with machine oil. Our secret laboratory had international branches. England, Germany, the United States all were involved in this macabre project of genetic manipulation. The Titanic was just one of many experiments, perhaps the most ambitious. I later discovered that some of the virus samples were preserved in secret facilities. We weren't the only ones developing this biological weapon. Governments around the world were competing to create the ultimate weapon, a virus that could turn soldiers into mindless destruction machines. The survivors who knew the truth formed a kind of silent brotherhood. Discreet meetings, coded communications. Some were bought with fortunes, others threatened with death. Silence was our only protection. My family never knew what really happened. To them, I was just another passenger who miraculously survived that tragic night. How many times did I look into their eyes, wishing I could tell the truth? The 3 vials of the virus I saved are my greatest secret. They are hidden in a place no one will ever find. They are my testimony, my proof that something far beyond a simple sinking happened that night. With each passing year, I feel the truth is closer to being revealed. But I also know that revealing this secret could mean my death sentence. The Titanic wasn't just a ship. It was a floating laboratory, a scientific experiment that went terribly wrong. The last chapter of my story is the hardest to share. Decades have passed, and the weight of the secret continues to consume me. In 1945, after the end of World War II, I discovered that some of our experiments were taken to Nazi laboratories. The zombie virus we developed on the Titanic had become a project of interest for scientists who would stop at nothing to create biological weapons. My secret contacts informed me that fragments of the original samples were used in experiments. In concentration camps, prisoners were test subjects for increasingly complex mutations of the virus. Human cruelty knew no bounds. In the 1960s, I realized I was being followed. Men in dark suits, penetrating stares, always close but never fully approaching. I knew my existence represented a risk to those who wanted to keep the secret buried in the depths of the Atlantic. My only protection was the 3 vials. They contained not only the original virus, but also detailed notes on our research. Should anything happen to me, I left instructions for part of this information to be revealed. The world believes the Titanic was a tragedy caused by an iceberg. How naive. We were part of a much larger project, an international conspiracy to develop the ultimate weapon, a virus capable of turning humans into destruction machines. Today, in my final years of life, I feel I must leave some record, not for glory, but as a warning. Science without ethics can become humanity's greatest nightmare. The few survivors who knew the truth have passed. I am the last guardian of this terrible secret that could completely change the history we know. The Titanic was much more than a ship. It was the beginning of something that should never have started. My time is near. I feel the same men who pursued me for decades are getting closer. My final act will be to reveal the absolute truth. The 3 vials I've guarded for so long will be my last message to the world. Inside them is not just the virus, but the definitive proof of a conspiracy that spanned generations. On the night before my 95th birthday, I decided to prepare my final testimony. I write these words knowing I probably won't see the dawn. I hear footsteps in the hallway. They are coming. The Titanic virus was just the first step in a much more complex plan. A project that began in 1912 and continued through wars, secret experiments, and government manipulations. I've left 3 sealed envelopes with my lawyer. Should anything happen to me, the truth will be revealed. Documents, samples, records that prove everything I've narrated. The world will finally know what really happened that fateful night. My final thoughts are of terror and hope. Terror at what humanity is capable of creating. Hope that this story may prevent future inhumane experiments. The Titanic was just the beginning. A floating laboratory that carried the germ of possible worldwide destruction. And I, Edward Thompson, was a silent witness to this story for nearly a century. I hear the door opening. They've arrived. Will the truth die with me? No. My documents will ensure the world knows. Goodbye, Edward Thompson, last survivor of the Titanic's secret laboratory.